The dusty stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store in Amarillo, Texas, and Declan Vance knew immediately something was wrong with the woman who practically tumbled from its door into the scorching August afternoon of 1878. He had been standing outside the telegraph office, waiting for word about the cattle shipment, when he saw her stumble down the coach steps, gripping the door frame like her life depended on it. The other passengers disembarked with far more grace, stepping carefully around the woman who stood swaying in the street, one gloved hand pressed to her forehead, the other clutching a worn carpetbag. Even from 20 feet away, Declan could see the flush in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the oppressive Texas heat. "Miss, you all right there?" Declan called out, already moving toward her. The woman turned to look at him, and he got his first clear view of her face. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair that was beginning to slip from its pins beneath a modest traveling bonnet. Her eyes were a striking green, but they were glassy and unfocused. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out before her knees buckled. Declan crossed the remaining distance in 3 long strides and caught her before she hit the ground. She was burning up, her fever so high he could feel it through the layers of her traveling dress. The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, and she looked up at him with confusion. "I am looking for Mr. Thomas Garrett," she whispered, her voice hoarse and trembling. "I came all the way from Pennsylvania. I am Clara Whitmore." Declan felt his stomach drop. Thomas Garrett had been one of the ranch hands at the neighboring property, and Declan knew exactly why this woman had traveled so far to find him. Garrett had placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride 6 months ago, bragging about it to anyone who would listen at the saloon. But 3 weeks passed. Garrett had been thrown from a horse and broke his neck. He was buried in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the town. "Easy now," Declan said, adjusting his hold on the woman as she sagged against him. Several townspeople were starting to gather, drawn by the commotion. "Someone fetch Doc Henderson, right now." "What is happening?" Clara asked, her words slurring slightly. "I need to find Mr. Garrett. We are to be married. I have the letters." "We will talk about that soon enough," Declan said, not having the heart to tell her the truth while she was in this state. "Right now, we need to get you somewhere cool and have the doctor look at you." "I cannot afford a doctor," Clara protested weakly. "I spent everything I had on the train ticket and the stagecoach fare. Mr. Garrett said he would provide everything once I arrived." Declan carried her toward his wagon, which was hitched outside the mercantile. "Do not worry about the cost. Just hold on." "I do not even know who you are," Clara said, but she was not fighting him. She simply did not have the strength. "Name is Declan Vance. I have a ranch about 4 miles outside town. You are burning up with fever, Miss Whitmore. We need to get you somewhere you can rest." "But Mr. Garrett is expecting me. The stagecoach is already late by 2 days because of a broken wheel in Fort Worth. He will be worried." Declan lifted her into the back of his wagon, where he had some empty grain sacks he quickly arranged into a makeshift bed. "I am sure he would understand that you need medical attention first." The truth was sitting heavy in Declan's chest. This woman had traveled over 1,000 miles to marry a man she had never met, only to arrive and find him dead. She had no money, no family here, and now she was sick with what looked like a serious fever. He could not just abandon her to her fate. Doc Henderson arrived within minutes, his medical bag in hand and his weathered face set in its usual expression of professional concern. He climbed into the back of the wagon and began examining Clara while Declan stood nearby, watching. "How long has she been traveling?" Doc Henderson asked, pulling back Clara's eyelids to check her pupils. "She said she came from Pennsylvania," Declan replied. Mentioned something about being delayed 2 days because of coach trouble. That is a long journey in August heat. The doctor pressed his hand to Clara's forehead and neck, then pulled out his stethoscope to listen to her chest. Her lungs sound clear, at least. This looks like severe exhaustion combined with what might be typhoid fever or something similar. Hard to say without watching her symptoms develop. She needs constant care, cool compresses and fluids. Lots of fluids. If her fever breaks in the next few days, she will likely recover. If it does not. He did not finish the sentence. I can take her to my ranch, Declan said. The words were out of his mouth before he had fully thought them through, but once he said them, he knew it was the right decision. I have room and my housekeeper Maria can help. Doc Henderson looked at him with raised eyebrows. That is mighty generous of you, Declan. This woman is a stranger. She is also alone and sick in a town where she does not know anyone. Declan glanced at Clara, who had drifted into unconsciousness. Besides, someone needs to tell her about Thomas Garrett, and she should hear that news when she is well enough to understand it. The doctor nodded slowly. Very well. I will ride out with you and get her settled, but I have to warn you, Declan. The next few days are going to be rough. Fevers like this can cause delirium, and she will need someone watching her around the clock. If her temperature spikes too high, it could cause permanent damage or worse. I understand, Declan said, though he was not entirely sure he did. He had nursed sick cattle and horses before, but a person was different. Still, what choice did he have? He could not leave her at the boarding house where old Mrs. Peterson would likely charge her for every day of care, money Clara did not have. And the small hospital in town was already overcrowded with victims of a recent mining accident. They made the journey to Declan's ranch as quickly as the wagon could manage without jostling Clara too badly. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink. The ranch house came into view, a solid 2-story structure that Declan's father had built 15 years earlier, before succumbing to influenza. It was not fancy, but it was sturdy and well-maintained, with a wide porch and shutters on every window. Maria Rodriguez, Declan's housekeeper, came out to meet them as soon as she heard the wagon. She was a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When she saw Clara unconscious in the back of the wagon, her expression immediately shifted to one of concern. Dios mío, what happened? Maria asked, hurrying down the porch steps. Mail-order bride for Thomas Garrett, Declan explained as he carefully lifted Clara from the wagon. Arrived on the afternoon stage with a high fever. Doc Henderson says she needs constant care for the next few days. Maria's eyes widened. But Thomas is dead. I know. She does not. Not yet. Declan carried Clara toward the house. Can you prepare the guest room upstairs? We will need cool water, clean cloths, and whatever else the doc says. Of course. Maria hurried ahead to open the front door and then rushed upstairs to prepare the room. Declan carried Clara up the stairs, her head lolling against his shoulder. She was so light it worried him. Had she been eating properly during her journey? The trip from Pennsylvania was long and expensive, and she had mentioned spending everything she had. He suspected she had likely sacrificed meals to afford the fare. Maria had the guest room ready within minutes. It was a simple room with a brass bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the eastern pasture. The sheets were fresh and crisp, and Maria had already opened the window to let in the cooler evening air. Declan laid Clara on the bed as gently as he could. Doc Henderson immediately set to work, removing her bonnet and the tight collar of her traveling dress to help her cool down. Maria, I need you to help me get her out of some of these layers, Doc Henderson said. She is overheating in all this fabric. While Maria and the doctor worked to make Clara more comfortable, Declan went downstairs to draw water from the well. He filled a large basin and brought it back upstairs along with several clean cloths. By the time he returned, Clara was down to her chemise and petticoat, covered modestly with a light sheet. Her face was flushed dark red, and she was beginning to mumble incoherently. "The fever is getting worse," Doc Henderson said, wringing out a cloth in the cool water and placing it on Clara's forehead. "This is going to be a long night. Someone needs to stay with her constantly, changing these compresses every few minutes to try to bring her temperature down." "I will do it," Declan said. Doc Henderson studied him for a moment. "You sure about that, son? It is going to mean no sleep." "I am sure." The doctor showed Declan how to properly wet the cloths and where to place them for maximum effect: forehead, neck, wrists, and behind the knees. He left a bottle of willow bark tincture with instructions to get a few drops into Clara if she woke up enough to swallow. Then he packed up his bag and stood to leave. "I will come by tomorrow morning to check on her," Doc Henderson said. "If her fever spikes dangerously high or if she has convulsions, send someone for me immediately, no matter what time it is." After the doctor left, Maria brought up a pitcher of water and a bowl of broth, just in case Clara woke up hungry. Then she too retired for the night, though Declan knew she would be up early to help in the morning. And so began the longest night of Declan's life. He pulled a chair close to Clara's bedside and set to work with the compresses. Every few minutes, he would wring out a fresh cloth in the cool water and replace the warm ones on her skin. Clara tossed and turned, alternating between shivering and burning up. She spoke in fragments, her words making no sense. "The letters were so kind," she murmured at one point. "Mother said it was foolish, but I had to try. There is nothing left for me in Harrisburg. Nothing." Declan found himself wondering about her story. What had driven her to answer an advertisement from a stranger and travel across the country to marry him? She seemed educated based on how she spoke. And she was certainly pretty enough that she should have had no shortage of suitors back home. Yet here she was, alone and desperate enough to become a mail-order bride. As the night wore on, Clara's fever continued to climb. Her skin was so hot that the compresses seemed to do little good. Declan lost track of how many times he refreshed them, working in a steady rhythm that became almost meditative. He found himself talking to her softly, though he knew she could not hear him. "You are going to be all right," he said, placing a fresh cloth on her forehead. "We are going to get you through this. You did not come all this way just to give up now." Around 3 in the morning, Clara's eyes suddenly flew open. She stared at the ceiling with a look of pure terror. "Father, please," she gasped. "Do not make me marry him. He is cruel. I have seen how he treats his horses." Declan leaned closer. "Clara, can you hear me? You are safe. You are at a ranch in Texas." But she was not seeing him. Her eyes were unfocused, lost in whatever fever dream held her. "I will leave instead," she continued. "I will answer one of those advertisements. Anything is better than marrying Edgar." So that was it, Declan thought. She had fled an engagement back home. Someone her father had wanted her to marry, someone cruel. And she had chosen the uncertainty of a mail-order marriage over that fate. His heart ached for what she must have endured to make such a desperate choice. Clara's hand suddenly shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes focused on his face, though he was not sure if she truly saw him. "Promise me," she whispered urgently. "Promise me I do not have to go back." "You do not have to go back," Declan said firmly. "I promise. You are safe here." Something in his tone must have reached her because Clara's grip loosened and her eyes drifted closed again. Her breathing evened out slightly, and Declan allowed himself to hope that maybe the worst was passing. But he was wrong. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Clara's fever spiked even higher. She started to convulse, her body going rigid as the fever seized her. Declan shouted for Maria, who came running in her nightgown. Together they held Clara down so she would not hurt herself, while Declan continued to apply cool compresses desperately. "Should I send one of the ranch hands for the doctor?" Maria asked, her voice tight with worry. Declan glanced at the window. The sun was just barely up. "Give it a few more minutes. Let us see if the compresses help." It was the longest few minutes of his life, but gradually the convulsions eased and Clara went limp against the pillows. Her fever was still dangerously high, but at least she was not seizing anymore. Declan sat back in his chair, exhausted and terrified. His shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool morning air, and his hands were trembling. Maria brought him coffee and something to eat, but he could barely stomach it. How could he think about food when this woman was fighting for her life in his guest room? The day passed in a blur. Doc Henderson came and went, checking Clara's vital signs and nodding approvingly at the care Declan had been providing. He left more willow bark tincture and some laudanum in case the convulsions returned. Then he departed to attend to his other patients, promising to return that evening. Declan did not leave Clara's side except to use the privy. Maria took over the compresses for short periods, forcing Declan to drink water and eat a little, but he always returned within minutes. He could not shake the feeling that if he left her alone, something terrible would happen. The second night was even harder than the first. Clara's fever remained stubbornly high, and she drifted in and out of delirium. Sometimes she called out for her mother. Other times she recited what sounded like poetry or scripture. Once she sang a lullaby in a voice so sweet and sad that Declan felt tears prick his eyes. "Sleep, baby, sleep," she sang weakly. "Your father tends the sheep. Your mother shakes the dreamland tree, and from it fall sweet dreams for thee. Did you sing that to children back home?" Declan asked softly, even though he knew she could not hear him, but to his surprise, Clara's eyes opened and focused on him. For a moment, she seemed almost lucid. "I taught school," she whispered, "before father lost his business, before Edgar. You were a teacher, 5th and 6th grades. I loved it." Her eyes drifted closed again. "But then father said we could not afford my independence anymore, said I had to marry well to save the family." Declan felt a surge of anger toward people he had never met. What kind of father would force his daughter into marriage against her will? And what kind of man was this Edgar, that Clara had been frightened enough to flee across the country? "You do not have to marry anyone you do not want to," Declan said firmly. "Not anymore." Clara's lips curved into the faintest smile before she slipped back into unconsciousness. As the night wore on, Declan found his eyelids growing heavy despite his determination to stay awake. He had been up for nearly 2 full days now, and his body was demanding rest. But every time he started to doze, Clara would make a sound or move, and he would jerk awake, immediately checking her fever and refreshing the compresses. Maria found him slumped in the chair around dawn, his hand still clutching a wet cloth, his head tilted back against the wall at an uncomfortable angle. She gently took the cloth from him and shooed him toward his own room. "Go sleep for a few hours," she said. "I will watch her." "But what if she gets worse?" Declan protested. "Then I will wake you immediately, but you are no good to her if you collapse from exhaustion." Reluctantly, Declan agreed. He stumbled to his room and fell onto his bed fully clothed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. He woke 4 hours later with his heart pounding, confused about why he was in his own bed. Then he remembered Clara and bolted upright. He could hear voices coming from the guest room, and he hurried down the hall, expecting the worst. But when he entered the room, he found Maria spooning broth into Clara's mouth while the young woman sat propped up against the pillows. Clara's eyes were open and clear, and while she still looked weak and flushed, the glassy quality of fever delirium was gone. "Her fever broke about an hour ago," Maria said, beaming. "She woke up asking for water." Relief flooded through Declan so powerfully that his knees went weak. He grabbed the door frame to steady himself. Clara turned her head to look at him, and for the first time he saw her truly conscious and aware. Her green eyes studied him with curiosity and a hint of embarrassment. "You are the man from the street," she said, her voice hoarse but coherent. "The one who caught me when I fell." "Yes, madam." "Declan Vance. Maria tells me you have been caring for me for 2 days, that you barely slept." Clara's cheeks flushed, though this time from embarrassment rather than fever. "I do not know how to thank you. I am so sorry for the trouble I have caused." "No trouble at all," Declan said, moving closer to the bed. "I am just glad you are on the mend." Clara took another spoonful of broth before speaking again. "Maria also tells me that you own this ranch, but I still do not understand why I am here. I came to Amarillo to meet Mr. Thomas Garrett. We have been corresponding for months, and he sent money for my travel. Where is he? Why has he not come to see me?" Declan and Maria exchanged glances. This was the conversation Declan had been dreading, but it could not be put off any longer. "Miss Whitmore," Declan began carefully, pulling the chair closer to the bed so he could sit. "There is no easy way to say this. Thomas Garrett passed away 3 weeks ago. He was thrown from a horse and broke his neck. I am truly sorry." The color drained from Clara's face. The spoon slipped from her fingers, clattering against the bowl. "Dead. But we were to be married. He promised me a new life here. I gave up everything to come. I know, and I am deeply sorry for your loss." Clara's hands started to shake. "I do not understand." "If he is dead, then why did no one send word? I spent weeks on trains and stage coaches. Someone could have sent a telegram to stop me." "I do not think anyone knew how to reach you," Declan said gently. "Garrett was not the type to share his personal business with others. I am not sure anyone even knew your name or where you were coming from until you arrived." Tears began streaming down Clara's face. "I have nothing," she whispered. "I spent my last dollar getting here. I sold my mother's jewelry to buy a proper dress for the wedding. I have no way to get home, and even if I could, there is nothing to go back to. My father made it very clear that if I went through with this, I would be dead to him." Maria made a sympathetic sound and wrapped an arm around Clara's shoulders. "Pobrecita, you rest now. We will figure something out." But Clara was spiraling into panic. "What am I going to do? I cannot impose on your hospitality forever, Mr. Vance. I have no money, no prospects, no family. I am completely alone." "You are not alone," Declan said firmly. "And you are welcome to stay here as long as you need while you recover and figure out your next steps." "But I cannot just live on your charity," Clara protested. "It is not proper, and I will not be a burden." An idea was forming in Declan's mind, though he was not sure if it was brilliant or completely insane. "Then work for me. I need someone to help with the bookkeeping and correspondence for the ranch. My father used to handle all that, and since he died, I have been doing it myself, but I hate it and I am terrible at it. You said you were a teacher, so I assume you can read and write and do figures." "Yes, but then it is settled. You will work as my assistant in exchange for room and board until you are well enough to decide what you want to do next. No charity, just honest work." Clara studied him with those sharp green eyes. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me at all." It was a fair question, and Declan was not entirely sure how to answer it. "I suppose because someone needs to be," he said finally. "You have had nothing but bad luck since you arrived in Texas. Seems to me it is time your luck changed." Something softened in Clara's expression. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. Truly, I will work hard to earn my keep, I promise." I have no doubt. But right now you need to rest and recover your strength. The paperwork can wait." Over the next few days, Clara's health steadily improved. The fever did not return, and she was soon able to get out of bed for short periods, though she tired easily. Maria fussed over her like a mother hen, making sure she ate proper meals and did not overexert herself. Declan found himself watching Clara more than he should. He told himself it was just to monitor her recovery, but he knew it was more than that. He was fascinated by her. She was different from the women he typically encountered in Amarillo. She was educated and well-spoken, but not in a pretentious way. She was kind to Maria and grateful for every small thing they did for her. And despite everything she had been through, she had a quiet strength about her that he admired. On the third day after her fever broke, Clara insisted on coming downstairs for dinner. Maria set the table in the dining room, which was rarely used since Declan usually ate in the kitchen when he was alone. They had pot roast with vegetables from Maria's garden and fresh bread that was still warm from the oven. "This is delicious," Clara said, closing her eyes in appreciation. "I do not think I have had a proper meal in weeks. Everything on the train was either stale or spoiled." "You should have seen the food they tried to serve at Fort Worth," Maria said, shaking her head. "One of the ranch hands told me the station house there serves beans so hard they could be used as ammunition." Clara laughed, and Declan was struck by how the sound transformed her face. She was pretty when she was serious, but when she laughed, she was beautiful. "So tell us about Pennsylvania," Declan said, eager to hear more about her. "What was it like growing up there?" Clara's smile faded a bit. "It was good for a while. My father ran a textile business and we lived comfortably. Not wealthy, but comfortable. My mother died when I was 16, and after that, things started to decline. Father made some poor investments and the business began to fail. By the time I was 20, we had lost almost everything. That must have been hard." "It was. But I was teaching by then, so I was able to support myself. I thought I could continue that way, that I could be independent, but Father had other ideas." She paused, pushing food around her plate. "He arranged a marriage with Edgar Sutton, the son of one of his business associates. Edgar was wealthy and willing to pay off Father's debts in exchange for my hand." "But you did not want to marry him," Declan said. "No. Edgar was cruel. I saw how he treated servants and animals. He once beat a dog nearly to death because it chewed his boot. When I objected, he told me it was a woman's place to be silent unless spoken to. I knew that if I married him, my life would be miserable." "So you found another way?" Clara nodded. "I saw an advertisement in the newspaper. Several men out west were seeking brides through correspondence. Thomas Garrett's letter seemed kind. He wrote about his life here, about the beauty of Texas and the opportunities available. He sent a photograph of himself that made him look respectable. He seemed like a decent man." "He was decent enough, I suppose," Declan said carefully. "He worked hard and kept to himself mostly. I did not know him well." "It does not matter now," Clara said quietly. "He is gone and I am here and I have to figure out what comes next. You have time to figure that out. There is no rush." But Declan could see the worry in Clara's eyes. She was a woman alone in the world with no resources and limited options. In 1878 Texas, that was a precarious position to be in. The following week, Clara began her work as Declan's assistant. He set her up in his father's old study, a small room off the main parlor that had a desk, some bookshelves, and a window overlooking the front pasture. The desk was piled high with months of neglected paperwork. Bills from suppliers, receipts from cattle sales, letters from potential buyers, and ledgers that had not been properly updated since spring. Clara took one look at the chaos and rolled up her sleeves. Within a day, She had organized everything into neat piles and began working through them systematically. She set up a proper bookkeeping system, recorded all the transactions, and drafted responses to the outstanding correspondence. Declan would come in to check on her progress and find her bent over the desk, her brow furrowed in concentration, her pen scratching efficiently across the paper. "You are a miracle worker," he said one afternoon, looking at the organized files and updated ledgers. "This would have taken me months to sort through." Clara looked up and smiled. "I enjoy it, actually. There is something satisfying about bringing order to chaos." "My father would have loved you," Declan said without thinking, then felt his face heat. "I mean, he would have been grateful for your skills. He was meticulous about the books." If Clara noticed his embarrassment, she was kind enough not to mention it. "Tell me about him, your father." So Declan did. He told her about how his father had come to Texas as a young man with nothing but determination and a dream. How he had built the ranch from nothing, working himself to exhaustion every day. How he had married late in life and had only one child, Declan. How he had taught Declan everything about ranching, but had died suddenly of influenza before teaching him about the business side. "He sounds like a remarkable man," Clara said softly. "He was. I just wish I had paid more attention when he tried to teach me about the paperwork. I was always more interested in being outside with the cattle. Everyone has their strengths. You are clearly good at running the ranch. That is what matters most." They fell into an easy routine over the following weeks. Clara would work in the study during the mornings when it was cooler, taking care of the correspondence and bookkeeping. In the afternoons, when the heat became oppressive, she would rest or help Maria in the house. Declan would check in with her regularly, supposedly to discuss ranch business, but really because he enjoyed her company. He found himself looking for excuses to spend time with her. He would bring her coffee while she worked and stay to discuss things that probably could have been handled in a few minutes. He would time his return to the house to coincide with when she took her afternoon break on the porch. He would linger at the dinner table, drawing out conversations long after the meal was finished. Maria noticed, of course. She missed nothing. "You like her," Maria said one morning while Declan was supposedly helping her prepare vegetables for lunch. In reality, he was watching through the kitchen window as Clara hung laundry on the line, humming to herself. "She is a nice woman," Declan said carefully. "She is more than nice, and you know it." Maria fixed him with a knowing look. "You have not been able to take your eyes off her since she arrived. I am just making sure she is recovering properly. Ememhum. And that is why you suddenly care about having fresh flowers in the house. And why you asked me to make that lemon cake, which you do not even like, because you heard Clara mention she enjoyed it." Declan felt his face heat. "I am just being a good host. You are falling in love with her." The words hung in the air between them. Declan wanted to deny it, but he could not. Maria was right. Somewhere between catching Clara as she fell in the street and watching her bring order to his chaotic paperwork, he had developed feelings for her, strong feelings. "It does not matter," he said finally. "She is only here temporarily. Once she gets back on her feet, she will want to leave, maybe go back east or find another situation somewhere." "Have you asked her what she wants?" "No." "Then maybe you should." But Declan was afraid to ask. He was afraid that if he brought up the future, Clara would realize she had no reason to stay. Better to keep things as they were, to treasure these weeks they had together, than to risk losing her sooner. Clara, meanwhile, was having her own internal struggle. She had not expected to like it here. Texas was hotter and dustier and more primitive than anything she had known in Pennsylvania. But there was something about the wide open spaces and the endless sky that called to something in her soul. And there was something about Declan that made her feel safe in a way she had never felt before. He was nothing like Edgar, who had been all smooth words and hidden cruelty. Declan was genuine. He was kind without being condescending. He was strong without being domineering. He worked hard alongside his ranch hands rather than simply ordering them around. And when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. But Clara knew she could not let herself fall for him. She was living on his charity, working for him, dependent on him. Any feelings she had could simply be gratitude mixed with proximity. And besides, what could she offer a man like Declan? She had come here to marry someone else. She had no money, no family, no prospects. She was damaged goods in the eyes of society, a mail-order bride whose intended husband had died. No respectable man would want her. So she threw herself into her work, trying to ignore the way her heart sped up when Declan entered a room. Trying not to notice how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, or how gentle his hands were when he worked with a difficult horse, or how his voice got soft when he talked about his father. One evening in early September, about 6 weeks after Clara's arrival, a storm rolled in from the west. It had been building all day, the air thick with humidity and the sky turning a sickly yellow-green color. By dinner time, the wind was howling and rain was lashing against the windows. Declan came in from securing the animals, soaked to the skin despite his oilskin coat. "It is going to be a rough one," he said, shaking water from his hair. "I told the ranch hands to bed down in the bunkhouse and stay there until morning." The storm hit in earnest around 8 o'clock. Thunder shook the house, and lightning illuminated the rooms in brief, stark flashes. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the shutters and finding every crack in the walls. Clara tried to pretend she was not frightened, but when a particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump, Declan noticed. "You all right?" he asked. "I am fine. Just not used to storms like this. In Pennsylvania, they were never quite so violent." Another flash of lightning lit up the room, followed immediately by thunder so loud it felt like the sky was splitting open. Clara could not help the small sound of fear that escaped her. Declan moved to sit beside her on the sofa. "Hey, it is all right. The house is solid. We are safe here." "I know. I am being foolish." "No, you are not. These storms can be intimidating even for people who have lived here their whole lives." They sat together in the flickering lamplight, listening to the storm rage outside. Every time the thunder crashed, Declan would quietly reassure her, his presence steady and calming. At some point, without either of them really meaning for it to happen, Clara's hand found his. He laced his fingers through hers, and they stayed that way, connected, while the storm battered the world outside. When the worst of it had passed, leaving only steady rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder, Clara realized she should probably go to bed. But she did not want to let go of Declan's hand. She did not want to leave this moment, this feeling of safety and connection. "Clara," Declan said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart started pounding, though she was not sure if it was from fear or hope. "What is it?" He turned to face her, his blue eyes serious in the lamplight. "I know you came here to marry Thomas Garrett. I know you were planning to start a new life with him. But he is gone and you are here, and I want you to know that you do not have to leave. Not ever if you do not want to." "Declan, let me finish. I know we have not known each other long. I know the circumstances are unusual. But these past weeks with you here, they have been the best weeks I have had in a long time. You have brought something to this house that has been missing since my father died. You have brought life and laughter and purpose. And I find myself hoping, maybe foolishly, that you might want to stay, not as my employee, as my wife." Clara's breath caught. "You want to marry me? I know it is fast. I know you probably need more time. But yes, if you would have me, I would be honored to make you my wife. You would want for nothing. I would treat you with respect and kindness, and I would do everything in my power to make you happy." Tears were streaming down Clara's face, but this time they were not from sadness or fear. "You saved my life," she whispered. "You stayed awake 3 nights caring for me when you had no reason to. You gave me work and dignity when I had nothing. You have been kinder to me than anyone in my life. How could I not fall in love with you?" Declan's face transformed with joy. "You love me." "Yes, you impossible man. I have been trying not to because I thought it was foolish and presumptuous, but I love you. I have loved you for weeks." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Then say yes. Say you will marry me." "Yes," Clara breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." Declan kissed her then, softly and sweetly, and Clara felt like she was finally home. Not the house she had grown up in, not the town in Pennsylvania that had never really appreciated her, but here in Texas in the arms of a cowboy who had stayed awake 3 nights to save her life. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Amarillo. Maria cried happy tears and insisted on making a cake that could feed half the town. Doc Henderson attended, along with several of the ranch hands and townspeople who had gotten to know Clara during her weeks there. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Maria had helped her make, her auburn hair pinned up with wildflowers that Declan had picked that morning. Declan wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes shining with joy as he watched Clara walk down the aisle toward him. The preacher kept the ceremony short and sweet, which suited them both fine. When it came time for Declan to kiss his bride, he did so thoroughly, not caring who was watching. Clara laughed against his lips, her arms wrapped around his neck, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The reception was held at the ranch, with long tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung between the trees. Someone brought a fiddle and another a guitar, and soon there was music and dancing. Clara was passed from partner to partner, spinning under the Texas stars, her face flushed and happy. But her favorite dance was the last one, when Declan took her hand and led her away from the crowd to a quiet spot near the barn. "Hello, Mrs. Vance," he said, pulling her close. "Hello, Mr. Vance," she replied, resting her head against his chest as they swayed to the distant music. "Are you happy? Happier than I ever thought possible. Good. Because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, two people who had found each other through the strangest of circumstances and decided to build a life together. That first year of marriage was not without its challenges. Clara had to learn how to run a ranch household, which was vastly different from anything she had experienced in Pennsylvania. There were times when she burned dinner or forgot to check the coop and lost eggs to a fox. There were times when she felt overwhelmed by the isolation, miles from the nearest neighbor with only Declan and Maria and the ranch hands for company. But Declan was patient and understanding. He never made her feel foolish for her mistakes. Instead, he would laugh and say everyone had to learn, and he would help her fix whatever had gone wrong. And on the days when she felt lonely, he would take her into town or invite neighbors over for dinner, or simply sit with her on the porch and talk until she felt better. Clara also continued to manage the ranch's paperwork, which gave her a sense of purpose and accomplishment. She was good at it, and she could see how her work made Declan's life easier. She expanded her role, corresponding with buyers across Texas and even into Kansas and Missouri. She negotiated better prices for their cattle and found new markets for their goods. Under her management, the ranch became more profitable than it had been in years. "You have a head for business," Declan told her one evening as they reviewed the quarterly accounts. "We made 30% more this quarter than the same time last year. That is because you are doing the work and I am just making sure we get paid properly for it," Clara said modestly. "No, it is because we make a good team. I handle the ranch, you handle the business, and together we are building something really special here." Clara smiled and leaned over to kiss him. "We are we not?" The seasons turned. Fall gave way to winter, which in Texas was mild compared to what Clara had known back east. There was frost in the mornings but rarely snow, and the days were often sunny and pleasant. Clara learned to appreciate the different rhythms of ranch life, the way each season brought different work and challenges. By spring, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to tell Declan until she was certain. She chose a quiet evening when they were alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Declan, I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. He turned to her, immediately concerned. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." The joy that spread across Declan's face was something Clara would remember for the rest of her life. He let out a whoop of excitement and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "A baby," he said, setting her down but keeping his hands on her waist. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy, Clara, I am over the moon. This is the best news I have ever gotten." He knelt down and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach, even though it was far too early to hear anything. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I am going to love you more than you can imagine." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full of love she could hardly breathe. This man, this wonderful man who had saved her life and given her a home and a future, was going to be the father of her child. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. As Clara's belly grew, Declan became increasingly protective and attentive. He would not let her lift anything heavy or do any strenuous work. He brought her pillows and cool drinks and rubbed her aching feet in the evenings. Maria clucked over her like a mother hen, making sure she ate enough and rested properly. On a cold November night in 1879, Clara went into labor. Declan rode into town to fetch Doc Henderson while Maria stayed with Clara, helping her through the contractions and preparing the bedroom for the birth. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next day. Declan wore a path in the hallway outside the bedroom, pacing back and forth, jumping at every sound. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, the cry of a newborn baby. Doc Henderson emerged from the bedroom with a tired smile. "Congratulations, Declan, you have a son." A son. Declan's knees went weak with relief and joy. "And Clara, is she all right?" "She is tired but fine. She did wonderfully. You can go in and see them now." Declan entered the bedroom to find Clara propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. And in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. His son. "Come meet him," Clara said softly. Declan crossed to the bed and sat down carefully. Clara pulled back the blanket so he could see the baby's face. He was beautiful, with a shock of dark hair and the tiniest features Declan had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" Declan asked. "Of course. He is your son." Clara carefully transferred the baby into Declan's arms, showing him how to support the head. Declan looked down at his son, this tiny perfect person that he and Clara had created together, and felt something shift fundamentally in his chest. This was what his father must have felt when Declan was born. This overwhelming love, this fierce protectiveness, this desire to give this child the best life possible. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son's face, Declan knew exactly what felt right. "Daniel," he said. "After my father, Daniel Vance." Clara smiled. "Daniel, I love it. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the world." Little Daniel Vance proved to be a healthy, happy baby. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's determination. As he grew, the ranch house filled with new sounds, baby cries and coos, laughter and songs. Clara would sing to Daniel the lullabies she had learned as a child, the same ones she had sung deliriously during her fever. Declan would hold his son in the evenings, rocking him to sleep while telling him about the ranch and the horses and everything they would do together when Daniel was older. Maria was in heaven, having a baby in the house to fuss over. She made Daniel little clothes and toys, and she was always ready to hold him so Clara could get some work done or rest. The ranch hands, tough cowboys who dealt with dangerous cattle and wild horses, turned into gentle giants around the baby, speaking in soft tones and making silly faces to get him to smile. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clara managed the household and the business side of the ranch, now with a baby on her hip or sleeping nearby. Declan ran the day-to-day operations, but he always made time for his family. Every evening, no matter how busy the day had been, he would come in for dinner and spend time with Clara and Daniel. 2 years passed in a blur of happiness. Daniel learned to walk and talk, becoming a bright, curious toddler who wanted to be involved in everything. He would follow Declan around the ranch, his little legs working hard to keep up, asking endless questions about the animals and the work. "Dada, why cow?" he would ask, pointing at the cattle. "Those are cows, son. We raise them and then sell them to people who need them." "Why need?" "For food and for leather and lots of things." "Oh." Daniel would think about this for a moment before coming up with his next question. Clara would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love. This life they had built together, this family, it was more than she had ever dreamed possible when she stepped off that stagecoach in Amarillo, so sick and afraid. In the spring of 1882, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. Daniel would be a big brother before the year was out. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Clara knew what to expect and was not as anxious, or perhaps because she was simply healthier and happier than she had been before. The second baby, a daughter they named Grace, arrived in October. She had Clara's auburn hair and Declan's blue eyes, a perfect combination of both parents. Daniel was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything and constantly asking to hold her. "Gentle," Clara would remind him. "Baby Grace is very delicate." "I be gentle, Mama," Daniel would promise, his face serious with concentration as he carefully stroked Grace's tiny hand. As the children grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Clara's business acumen and Declan's ranching skills proved to be a winning combination. They expanded their operations, buying additional land and increasing their herd. They became known throughout the region as reliable and fair dealers, and buyers would come from as far away as Kansas City to do business with them. But through all the success and growth, Declan and Clara never lost sight of what was truly important, their family. They made sure to set aside time for each other and the children, no matter how busy things got. They would have picnics down by the creek, or Declan would take Daniel riding while Clara taught Grace to bake with Maria. In the evenings, they would gather in the parlor, Declan reading aloud while Clara did needlework, and the children played nearby. One evening, about 5 years after their wedding, Clara and Declan were sitting on the porch after putting the children to bed. It had become their routine, this quiet time together after the chaos of the day. They would sit and talk, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. "You ever think about how we met?" Clara asked, leaning her head on Declan's shoulder. "All the time," Declan replied, wrapping his arm around her. "You stumbled off that stagecoach burning up with fever, and I knew I had to help you. You could have just taken me to the boarding house. Let someone else deal with me. I could have, but I am very glad I did not." Clara lifted her head to look at him. "Why did you do it? Really?" "You did not know me. I was a stranger who had come to marry another man." Declan thought about this for a moment. "Honestly, I am not sure I can explain it. There was something about you, even sick and delirious as you were, something that called to me. Like I was supposed to help you, supposed to be the one who stayed awake those 3 nights keeping watch. Like it was meant to be. You believe in fate. I do now. I think you were supposed to answer Thomas Garrett's advertisement, and he was supposed to die, as terrible as that sounds. Because all of it brought you here to me, to this life we have together, and I would not change a single thing about it." Clara kissed him, soft and sweet. "Neither would I. Sometimes I think about the life I would have had if I had married Edgar or if I had stayed in Pennsylvania. It makes me shudder. That is never going to happen. You are mine now and I am yours, and that is how it is going to stay. Promise. I promise. Until the day I die and beyond that." They sat together watching the stars come out, counting their blessings, grateful for the strange path that had brought them together. The years continued to pass, bringing more joy and some challenges. There was a drought one year that tested them, and a winter so harsh they lost some cattle. Clara's father passed away, and while she had been estranged from him, she still grieved for what might have been. She wrote to her old friends in Pennsylvania, trying to reconnect, but found that most had moved on with their lives and had little interest in maintaining a correspondence across such distance. But through it all, Clara and Declan had each other. Their love deepened with time, growing stronger through shared experiences and challenges overcome. They learned each other's moods and needs, developing the kind of wordless communication that comes with years of partnership. Daniel grew into a fine young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. By the time he was 12, he was already a skilled rider and had a natural way with the cattle. Grace proved to be bright and creative, with a talent for drawing and a love of books that Clara encouraged. In 1889, Clara gave birth to their third child, another son they named Matthew. This time, Daniel and Grace were old enough to truly help, and they doted on their baby brother with all the enthusiasm of older siblings. Matthew was a happy baby who rarely cried and seemed to find joy in everything around him. 3 children, Declan said one night, watching Clara rock Matthew to sleep. "Never thought I would be so lucky." "Lucky? You do realize that 3 children means 3 times the chaos, right?" But Clara was smiling as she said it. "I would not have it any other way." As the 1890s dawned, Declan and Clara found themselves in their 40s, with children ranging from a baby to a teenager. The ranch had grown from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the region. They had added more ranch hands, built a larger barn, and even installed one of the new windmills that made water access so much easier. One day, a letter arrived that surprised them both. It was from Edgar Sutton, Clara's former intended. "I do not believe it," Clara said, staring at the envelope. "After all these years, are you going to open it?" Declan asked. Clara slit the envelope and pulled out the letter. Her eyes scanned the page, her expression shifting from surprise to something like satisfaction. "What does it say?" "He is apologizing. Says he realized years ago that I was right to run, that he was not a good man back then. He got married 5 years ago to a woman who, in his words, helped him become better. They have 2 children. He wanted to reach out and apologize for how he treated me and to thank me for having the courage to leave. Well, Declan said, that is unexpected. It is. And you know what? I am glad for him. I am glad he found someone who made him want to be better. And I am glad I had the courage to leave, because it brought me here to you. Clara folded the letter and put it away. That chapter of her life was closed, the wounds healed. She had no anger left for Edgar or her father or anyone from her past. She had her present, her future, her family. That was all that mattered. In 1895, Daniel fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Her name was Sarah, and she was a spirited young woman who could ride as well as any man and was not afraid of hard work. Declan and Clara liked her immediately and gave their blessing when Daniel asked for their permission to propose. The wedding was held at the ranch, a much larger affair than Declan and Clara's simple ceremony had been. The whole community turned out to celebrate, and the party lasted well into the night. Clara cried happy tears as she watched her firstborn son pledge his life to the woman he loved, remembering the day she had done the same. "They remind me of us," Declan said, standing beside her. "How so?" "The way they look at each other, like they cannot quite believe their luck. We were lucky, were we not? We were. We are." Daniel and Sarah built a house on the far corner of the ranch property, close enough to help with the work but far enough to have their own space. Within a year, they had made Declan and Clara grandparents for the first time. The baby, a girl named Emma, became the delight of the entire family. Grace, meanwhile, had decided she wanted to be a teacher like her mother had been. She went away to a teaching college in Austin, much to Clara's pride and Declan's worry. But she did well there, and returned after 2 years with a teaching certificate and a quiet young man named James who worked at the college library. They married in 1898, and Grace took a position teaching at the school in Amarillo. Matthew, the youngest, was still figuring out his path. He loved the ranch but also had a restless spirit that reminded Clara of herself at that age. He talked about seeing more of the world, maybe going east to see the big cities. "Let him go," Clara told Declan when he worried about Matthew leaving. "He needs to see what is out there so he can decide where he truly wants to be. But what if he does not come back? Then we will know he found his place. But I suspect he will come back. This ranch is in his blood, same as Daniel." As the new century approached, Declan and Clara found themselves in a position they had never imagined in those early days. They were successful, respected members of the community. They had raised 3 children who had become good, kind adults. They had built something lasting, something that would continue after they were gone. On New Year's Eve of 1899, as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Declan and Clara stood on their porch watching fireworks someone had set off in town. The distant pops and sparkles lit up the night sky. "Hard to believe it has been over 20 years, Clara said. 21 years since you stumbled off that stagecoach," Declan agreed. 20 years since we married. You ever regret it, taking in a sick stranger who had come to marry someone else?" Declan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Even after all these years, even with silver threading through both their hair and lines on their faces, he still looked at her with the same love and devotion he had shown that night during the storm when he first told her he loved her. "Not for one single second," he said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Vance. The very best thing. Even though I almost died in your guest room, even though. Maybe especially because of that. Those 3 nights I spent caring for you, watching you fight through that fever, I learned something about myself. I learned that I was capable of loving someone completely, of putting someone else's needs above my own. And when you recovered, when you opened your eyes and looked at me clearly for the first time, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you." Clara felt tears pricking her eyes. After all these years, he could still make her cry with his words. "I love you, Declan Vance. I have loved you for 21 years, and I will love you for however many more years we have. Then let us make them count." They stood together under the stars, the same stars they had stood under on their wedding night, and they made silent promises to each other for the century ahead. The years after the turn of the century were good ones. Matthew did eventually leave to see the world, but true to Clara's prediction, he came back after 2 years with a deeper appreciation for the ranch and a determination to help make it even better. He brought new ideas about ranching techniques he had learned in California and introduced innovations that increased their efficiency. Daniel and Sarah had 3 more children, giving Declan and Clara a total of 4 grandchildren to spoil. Grace and James had 2 children, both boys who were as bookish as their parents. The ranch house that had once seemed so big with just Declan and Clara now seemed small with 3 generations running through it during family gatherings. In 1905, Maria passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. She had been with Declan since his father died, and had become like a second mother to him and a grandmother to his children. Her death hit the family hard, but they took comfort in knowing she had lived a full life surrounded by people who loved her. "She would be so proud of what we have built," Clara said at the funeral, holding Declan's hand. "She was proud. She told me so many times. She used to say that bringing you home that day was the smartest thing I ever did." She was right about that. As Declan and Clara entered their 60s, they began to slow down. Daniel took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, with Matthew as his right hand. Grace continued teaching, now with her own children in her classroom. The ranch continued to prosper under the younger generation's management, but Declan and Clara's influence was still felt in every decision made. They spent their days in quieter pursuits now. Clara maintained the business correspondence but left the more strenuous work to others. Declan still rode out to check on things, but was content to let his sons handle the heavy work. They spent their evenings on the porch, same as always, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. One evening, in the spring of 1910, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara reached over and took Declan's hand. "Do you remember that first night, when the storm came and I was so frightened? I remember, you held my hand just like this. I did not want to let go. Even then I felt safe with you. You are safe with me. You always have been. You always will be." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, content. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the colors fade from the sky and the first stars appear. "Declan." "Yes, love. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for letting me." They sat together as the night deepened around them. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. A mail-order bride who arrived with a fever, and a cowboy who stayed awake 3 nights caring for her. A love story written in the dust of Texas, enduring through decades, growing stronger with each passing year. In the summer of 1912, the whole family gathered at the ranch to celebrate Declan and Clara's 60th birthdays, which were just a few months apart. The yard was filled with children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. As Declan and Clara sat in the place of honor, watching their family celebrate around them, they could not help but marvel at the journey that had brought them here. "Not bad for a woman who almost died in my guest room," Declan said, smiling at Clara. "Not bad for a cowboy who did not know when to leave a stranger to her fate," Clara replied. "Never was good at minding my own business. Thank God for that." Daniel stood up to make a toast, calling for everyone's attention. "I want to say something about my parents," he began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Most of you know the story of how they met. How my mother arrived in Amarillo sick with fever. How my father took her in and cared for her, even though she was a complete stranger. How he stayed awake 3 nights to make sure she survived." Clara felt her eyes misting as Daniel continued. "What you might not know is that in saving my mother's life, my father saved his own. He told me once that after his father died, this ranch felt empty. He was going through the motions, working hard but not really living. And then my mother arrived and everything changed. She brought light and laughter back into his life. She brought purpose." Daniel raised his glass. "So here is to my parents, who proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Happy birthday to you both. May you have many more years together." "To Declan and Clara," the crowd chorused, raising their glasses. Later, after most of the guests had gone home and only family remained, Clara and Declan found themselves alone on the porch once more. Their usual spot, their usual time, their usual comfort. "It has been a good life," Clara said softly. "The best life," Declan agreed. "I cannot imagine what would have happened if you had not caught me that day, if you had let me fall in the street or taken me to the boarding house instead of bringing me here. I think about that sometimes too. And I am grateful every day that I made the choice I did. You know what I remember most clearly from those 3 nights when I was so sick? What? Your voice. I was lost in fever dreams most of the time, but your voice kept pulling me back. You kept telling me I was going to be all right, that I was safe, that I just had to hold on. And I believed you. Even when I did not know who you were or where I was, I believed you." Declan squeezed her hand. "You fought so hard to survive. I have never seen anyone fight like that. I had something to live for, even if I did not know it yet. I had you waiting for me on the other side of that fever." They sat together as the moon rose over the Texas plains, two old people who had loved each other well for over 30 years. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. They had raised children and built a legacy. They had turned a chance encounter into a lifetime of love. As the years continued to pass, Declan and Clara grew older, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, more precious with each passing day. They knew their time together was not infinite, that eventually one would have to say goodbye to the other. But they tried not to dwell on that. Instead, they focused on the present, on the joy of waking up beside each other every morning, on the pleasure of shared meals and shared memories. In the fall of 1918, Declan fell ill with pneumonia. It came on suddenly, a cough that turned serious within days. Doc Henderson's son, who had taken over the practice when his father retired, came to examine him and shook his head grimly. "He is strong," young Doc Henderson said, "but he is also 70 years old. Pneumonia at that age is serious." Clara refused to leave Declan's side. She sat up in their bedroom with cool compresses and medicine, determined to nurse him back to health the same way he had nursed her all those years ago. "Turnabout is fair play," she told Maria's daughter Rosa, who had taken her mother's place as housekeeper. "He stayed awake 3 nights for me. I will stay awake for him for as long as it takes." And she did. For 3 nights, Clara barely slept. She bathed Declan's fevered brow with cool cloths. She spooned medicine into his mouth. She talked to him constantly, telling him stories of their life together, reminding him of all the reasons he had to fight to survive. "Remember the storm," she said on the second night, holding his hand. "Remember how frightened I was. You stayed with me. You held my hand just like this and told me we were safe. Well, we are still safe, Declan, but I need you to fight. I need you to come back to me." On the morning of the fourth day, Declan's fever broke. His eyes opened, clear and focused, and found Clara's face. "You stayed," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Of course I stayed. Did you think I would leave you 3 nights, same as you did for me?" Declan smiled weakly. "We are even then." "We have always been even, you stubborn man. Now rest. You need to get your strength back." Declan recovered slowly but surely. By Christmas, he was back to his old self, if perhaps a bit more aware of his mortality. He held Clara a little tighter, treasured each day a little more, made sure his children and grandchildren knew how much he loved them. In the spring of 1920, as they sat on their porch watching another Texas sunset, Declan turned to Clara with a serious expression. "I need to tell you something." Clara felt a flutter of concern. "What is it?" "I am grateful for all of it, for every moment we have had together. I know I do not say it enough, but you need to know. You are the greatest gift I have ever received. That day you fell off the stagecoach into my life, that was the day my real life began." "Declan, let me finish. I know we are both getting old. I know our time together is not infinite. But whatever time we have left, whether it is 1 year or 20, I want you to know that I would choose you again. Every single time. In every lifetime. You are my person, Clara. My only person." Clara was crying now, happy tears streaming down her weathered face. "And you are mine. You will always be mine. Even after death parts us, you will still be mine." They kissed then, soft and sweet, two old people who loved each other with the same intensity they had felt as newlyweds 4 decades earlier. Declan and Clara Vance lived to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929. The celebration was even bigger than the one for their 60th birthdays had been. All 3 of their children were there with their spouses and children. There were grandchildren and great-grandchildren running around the ranch, filling it with noise and life and love. As Declan and Clara stood together, cutting the massive anniversary cake that Grace had made, they looked out at the sea of faces around them. This was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the business, but this family they had created. All these people who existed because 2 strangers had found each other in the dusty streets of Amarillo, Texas, in the summer of 1878. 50 years, Clara said, shaking her head in wonder. "How is that possible?" "When you are happy, time flies," Declan replied. "Are you happy, Declan? Have you been happy all these years?" He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. His hands were weathered and spotted with age now, but they were still strong. "Clara Vance, I have been happy every single day since you stumbled into my life. Even the hard days, even the sad days, I have been happy because I had you beside me. You are my happiness, and you are mine." They kissed to the applause and cheers of their family. 50 years together and still in love. Declan passed away peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning in 1932, at the age of 83. He had spent the previous evening on the porch with Clara, talking and laughing and holding hands as they had done thousands of times before. He had kissed her good night, told her he loved her, and gone to bed. And sometime in the night, his heart simply stopped beating. Clara woke to find him beside her, looking peaceful and at rest. She held his hand and cried, grieving the loss of her partner of 53 years. But she also felt grateful. They had been given so much time together, more than many couples got. And he had gone peacefully, without pain or suffering, surrounded by the love they had built together. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from all over Texas to pay their respects. Declan had been a pillar of the community, respected and loved by many. But for Clara, the only thing that mattered was the memories she carried in her heart. The memory of him catching her as she fell. The memory of his voice cutting through her fever dreams, calling her back to life. The memory of the first time he told her he loved her during a storm. The memory of 53 years of shared mornings and shared evenings, shared joys and shared sorrows. Clara lived for another 6 years after Declan's death. She stayed on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Daniel and his family moved into the main house to take care of her, and she spent her days sitting on the porch, watching the Texas sunsets she and Declan had loved so much. She talked about Declan often, sharing stories with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She wanted them to know him, to understand what kind of man he had been. She wanted them to know the story of how they had met, how he had stayed awake 3 nights caring for her when he had no reason to, how that act of kindness had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime. On a warm evening in May of 1938, Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep, just as Declan had. She was 86 years old. Her last words to her family had been about Declan, about how she was ready to see him again, about how she had missed him every day of the 6 years they had been apart. They buried her next to Declan in the family cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone was simple. Clara Whitmore Vance, 1852–1938, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. But those who knew her story understood that those few words could not capture who she had been. She had been a woman of courage and determination, who had traveled across a continent to start a new life. She had been a survivor, who had fought through illness to find her destiny. She had been a partner, working alongside her husband to build something lasting. She had been a lover, who had cherished her husband through 53 years of marriage and beyond. But most of all, she had been proof that sometimes the most unexpected circumstances can lead to the most beautiful outcomes. That sometimes fate works in mysterious ways, bringing 2 souls together across time and distance and circumstance. That sometimes love arrives with a fever, delivered by a dusty stagecoach to a small Texas town, and changes everything. The ranch continued to prosper under Daniel's management, and later under his children's. The Vance name became synonymous with quality and integrity in Texas ranching circles. But more than the business success, the family treasured the legacy of love that Declan and Clara had established. They had shown their children and grandchildren what a true partnership looked like, what it meant to choose someone every day, what it meant to build a life together based on respect and kindness and unwavering devotion. And on quiet evenings, when the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset, someone would always tell the story again. The story of the mail-order bride who arrived with a fever and the cowboy who stayed awake 3 nights caring for her. The story of how 2 strangers became partners, then lovers, then the foundation of a family that would span generations. It was a story of love against the odds, of kindness rewarded, of 2 souls finding each other in the vast expanse of the American West. And it was a story that would be told and retold, passed down through the generations. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of compassion, and that true love can be found in the most unexpected places.